Hey, what's up, Spencer? My name is everybody, and welcome back to my channel. So about a month ago, a podcast called Masters, The Allegations Against Neil Gaiman, came out and presented the accusations of two women against famous author Neil Gaiman. Now, about a month later, a fifth episode of this podcast has been released and presents two new victims who are also accusing Neil Gaiman of sexual misconduct. If this is the first time that you're hearing about this, I did make a video covering the first 4 episodes of the podcast and talking about what the first 2 victims were alleging. So I do suggest that you check that one out before continuing to watch this video. I do also have a factual correction that I need to make with this video. In it, I did say that Amanda Palmer is Neil Gaiman's wife when she is actually his ex-wife. I believe they got divorced in 2022, but she was his wife during the time that a good portion of these allegations were being made. And even though she's been divorced from him for almost 2 years now, she still has not come out in support of the victims or to condemn Gaiman, which is something that is a huge red flag for me. I personally think that the reason why she's not addressing this situation is because then she would have to answer questions such as, how could you have been in the middle of this and not said or done anything? And some people have been arguing that Amanda Palmer just flat didn't know about what was happening, but seeing as she has supposedly said that multiple women have come to talk to her about Gaiman's behavior, it seems to me like she would have had to have been purposefully ignorant to not know what was going on in her own home. Anyway, like I said, this video is going to cover the 2 new victims and the new allegations that have come forward. I am going to be basing this video off of the article written by Rachel Johnson. I'm personally not really a big fan of Rachel Johnson, but she is the person who made the podcast and interviewed these victims and wrote this article, so she is really the best person to get this information from. So the first woman that we're going to be talking about is a woman named Julia Hobsbawm, and this takes place in 1986 when she was 22 and Neil Gaiman was 25. Hobsbawm states that she doesn't quite remember how this happened, but Neil Gaiman ended up coming back to her apartment where he proceeded to make, quote, an aggressive, unwanted pass on her, where he pushed her down on the couch and was forcefully making out with her. She was able to wiggle out of his grasp, thankfully, and then cut off all contact with Neil Gaiman, but she does state that she feels really bad about the fact that she hasn't been more open about this in the past, because she felt that if she had been, then that could have potentially deterred future things from happening and protected the women that this has happened to. Gaiman's versions of these events is that he was a young, dumb man who simply misinterpreted the vibes that Hobsbawm was giving off, and that once he knew that she wasn't into it, that he just left it alone. The second woman who we're going to be talking about is named Caroline Wallner, and she lived on Gaiman's Woodstock, New York property with her 3 daughters and her then husband from 2014 to 2021. Wallner and her husband both worked kind of as assistants for Gaiman, where they would do whatever the property needed, whether it was yard work, housework, grocery shopping, you know, all that stuff. In 2017, Wallner and her husband separated, and not long after, Gaiman told Mr. Wallner that there was no longer any work for him on the property, which led to him moving out and trying to find work somewhere else. As soon as Mr. Wallner was gone, Gaiman apparently started making sexual advances on Caroline Wallner, insinuating that if she did not fulfill these requests, then he would no longer have work for her as well, and she would need to also move out of the property. Honestly, I think the creepiest thing that I have heard about this situation is that apparently one night Wallner woke up to find Gaiman in her bed already when he then proceeded to expect her to perform. And honestly, that is just so creepy. Like, I kid you not, I had a bad dream last night over just reading about that. I cannot imagine what it must be like to have actually gone through that. Wallner states that when COVID happened, Gaiman ended up leaving the property and that she felt, quote, so relieved until she started receiving sexual text messages from him, and he was asking her to send back illicit photos and videos. When she ended up ignoring these requests, Gaiman had his business manager tell Woolner that there was no more work for her and that she needed to leave, and offered her $5,000 to do so. At this point in time, Woolner was struggling with what was happening so much that she was being treated for PTSD and depression, and on December 9th of 2021, she ended up emailing Gaiman's representatives stating that she wanted $300,000 to cover the medical and emotional expense of what was happening, and she agreed to sign an NDA. 2 weeks later, they ended up agreeing on $275,000, and Woolner signed an NDA stating that she was not allowed to talk about this situation with friends, family, authorities, and that she was not allowed to press charges against Gaiman. Now, I know that a lot of people have kind of been arguing about this because cases like this can devolve into a he said, she said type thing because other people aren't around for this. But I think that this clearly shows that Gaiman knew what he was doing was wrong, because clearly he is trying to legally bind these women from going to the authorities about these situations. And you might be wondering, if Woolner signed an NDA, how is she able to be on this podcast talking about this, and how is she able to put her story out there? Well, it turns out that NDAs do not count when they're being used to cover up criminal activity. So, for example, if you and I were in a car driving down the road and I happened to hit and kill someone, and then I made you sign an NDA stating that you were not allowed to talk about the fact that I killed someone, that NDA would be null and void because I'm trying to use it to cover up the fact that I murdered someone. In the same stream, this NDA does not count because it is trying to be used to cover up sexual abuse. Thus, Woolner is allowed to talk about what happened between her and Gaiman. So now we are starting to get a timeline for all of this abuse and misconduct that has been happening. A timeline that stretches back about 40 years now. It starts in 1986, which is about only 2 years after Neil Gaiman has published his first book, and this is when he has the aggressive encounter with Julia Hobsbawm. Then in 2003, he meets an 18-year-old fan who's going by the name Kay at a fan event, and 2 years later starts a sexual relationship with her. In 2007, Gaiman allegedly penetrated Kay despite her saying that she did not want that to happen because she was having a very painful infection. And 10 years later, he coerces Woolner into giving him sexual favors in return for housing and a job. And this is something that lasts until 2021. In February of 2022, Gaiman has allegedly assaulted Scarlett in a bathtub on the very first day of her work before proceeding to have an aggressive sexual relationship with her for the next 6 weeks. And then in May of 2022, he also got Scarlett to sign an NDA, one that was backdated so that it would cover the situation in the bathtub. Now, as a famous author, I'm sure that Neil Gaiman probably has a lot of people signing NDAs for a variety of reasons. For example, if he's having beta readers read a manuscript that he has yet to publish yet, they probably have to sign an NDA stating that they're not allowed to go on Twitter and tweet out a bunch of spoilers about the book. However, once you start getting sexual partners to sign NDAs, I don't know, man, but like maybe that should be a hint. Maybe that should tell you that you're like doing something wrong and you should like stop. Maybe like, come on, man. Like, I don't know about you, but this is a little bit obvious to me that if you are having to legally gag your sexual partners, maybe you shouldn't be having sex with people. And like I said in my last video, despite multiple women coming forward about this and tons of news outlets covering it, tons of YouTubers talking about this, it doesn't seem like any companies care or are going to step back from any of the projects that they are working on with him. And because he's such a huge author with such a massive library of books, like not even counting what he did with Terry Pratchett, he could probably never show his face in public ever again and still be making millions of dollars a year. He could very easily retire to a private island and live the rest of his life in the lap of luxury while his victims are struggling to pay the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of therapy that they are going to need because of his actions. Alright, that's kind of what I have for the video. We have these 4 women who came forward. We got a little bit of a timeline going on. There doesn't seem to be any consequences, unfortunately. And with the end of this video, the only thing that I can really do is to say, to the victims who have come forward and to all the victims who have not come forward, I really hope that you are able to find peace in your life and that you are able to live a good, full life despite the terrible things that have happened. And I really hope that justice comes in some form in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more like it. But besides that, I hope that you stay safe and have a fantastic day. Bye.